can't see.
I'd like to call to order the Sea Ranch Association Board of Directors special regular session on fire safety. The board shortly will be evacuating their seats in favor of the participating panel members. And I'd like to kind of step out in front of the curve here and thank everyone who pulled this together today. This has not been casually done or easily done. If you could have seen the packet that we all got, it's like that thick, which they reduced down to a CD. It kind of takes the history of the fire safety efforts here on Sea Ranch and tries to give us a picture of what has been done. And I really want to thank everybody that worked on that. This has been a big effort on the part of staff and the volunteers and everybody that's contributed, past and present, whether you're here at the front of the room or in the Delmar Hall or you're here just in spirit. So you certainly have my appreciation and the appreciation of the board. Our goal today is to hear did that today? Well, I kind of included it. Okay. But specifically, I do appreciate the Fire Safety Council because I'll tell you, those were the first ones that I called when we got to thinking about this. And Jackie and CalFire, everybody that helped put this together. Go back to the printed station. That's it. That said, our goal here today is to hear from the many professionals, volunteers, and staff regarding the current fire safety status or condition of our community. Knowing what's been done and how it's been accomplished is very helpful, but the real issue is what needs to be done and what can be done best and most reasonably to preserve our community going forward. So this is just intended to be a state of the state, and I would ask that the board vacate the seats here for the real work. And again, sincerely extend our appreciation to the Fire Safety Council and the professionals that we have here for everything they have done and will be doing on our behalf.
Do we absolutely have to move? I mean, am I in somebody's way if I just stay here? No. I'll just stay here. Let's take the magic pills.
Is the Director of Works. And I'd just like to say as an introduction, it's a pleasure to be here to present the state of the state on fuels management of the Sea Ranch. We are here to share what we have become as a community. As a community, we are addressing the issues surrounding the management of vegetated fuels. Unlike a random passing thought, the management of fuels is and has become a progressive Sea Ranch community program, synonymous with such phrases as fire-wise, fire-safe, sensibility, awareness, and partnership with outside agencies. As has been presented over time, the Sea Ranch stands unparalleled in its fuels management efforts and success. Our present status could not have been a possibility without volunteer efforts, staff support, and operations. Property owners working with PRC 4291 and overall community support have made this program a success. In an effort to provide information of the Fuels Management Program, a resource manual has been prepared by the Fire Safety Council and is available for review at the association office. The 600 pages in this document have been reduced from about, 3,000 or 4,000 pages of relative documents, and has been provided to the board members, and as I said, is available at the Sea Ranch Association office for review. And an electronic version of the CD of those 600 pages is also available, and there's a sign-up sheet in the back for requests from the association office, and we can produce those and you can take a look at what's in that document. So without further ado, and there's a lot of information to cover today, I'd like to introduce the following folks. who are responsible. Hope I don't leave anybody out. For the continuance of this highly effective program. Bill Wiemeyer. Bill, raise your hand. Okay, Captain Shelley Spear with CalFire. Bill Wiemeyer again, as you see in the agenda. Jackie Gardner and John Prescott. These are members of the Fire Safe Council. Then we get to Louise DeWilder, Bonnie Plakos, or Plakos, and Caerleon and Safford. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bill Wiemeyer.
When the Fire Safe Council first started thinking about what to present to the board, can you hear?
There,
No?
it's better.
Okay, okay. When the Fire Safe Council first started thinking about what to present to the board, we decided that it was important to review a little bit of the history of fuel management at the Sea Ranch. And I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it's important for the board to know where we started and the progression that has happened over time and the more aggressive nature of each iterative step of fuel management on the Sea Ranch. The highlights of the history are pine plantation management prior to 1990 and into through 2000. In the 1980s, when I first got here, the major focus of fuel management was in the pine plantations. In 1990, the Beck report was prepared, and it was really the first comprehensive plan for fuel management on the Sea Ranch. Resolution 82 that came in 1995 really expanded on the efforts of the association and expanded on the implementation of the Beck plan by greater funding by the board. And also during the 1990s, we explored certain programs like the vegetation management program through CalFire, and also we explored the idea of grazing for the Sea Ranch as a way of managing fuels over time. Yeah. This is what the pine plantations of the Sea Ranch looked like back in the 80s. As you can see, there's a ton of deadwood in that. The trees are very, very close together. And so the major effort in the 80s was to reduce the fuel loads in the pine plantations. Then next. This is one of the Sea Ranch icons of fuel management on your left there, doing his job. Next. In some cases, there was a considerable amount of tree removal done. This was to create canopy gaps in the pine plantation. But the major focus was also to provide health to the pine plantation as well by thinning the stands so that the trees that are remaining would be more healthy. Next. In 1990, the Beck report was prepared by Eldon Beck, and it wasn't really a plan so much as a series of recommendations by Eldon Beck to do fuel management throughout the Sea Ranch. And as I mentioned earlier, it was expedited by funding and adoption of Resolution 82 in 1995. The recommendations included such things, and you can see from the page on the right, which was out of the recommendations, included understory fuel breaks throughout portions of the commons on the Sea Ranch. Next. This is actually a photograph of the working plan that we used in the 90s to implement the Beck recommendations. And you can see from the plan there that a lot of the fuel treatments are similar to what's in our plan today, our revised plan. They included things like expansion of the Highway 1 fire break, understory fuel breaks, canopy breaks in the pine plantations, fuel breaks within meadows, and roadside fuel breaks. In this box here on the right were the years in which see that very well, but all those dots up there represent years and activities during that period of time. It went from about 1995, or just prior to 1995, up to the year 2000. Next. Complementing the fuels management plan was the land management program. And they had a lot to do with fuel management as well, especially with respect to, for example, here, our meadow management areas that are designated up here on the maps with the yellow circles. Also, removal of Monterey pine clusters and drainage-way conifer removals to remove conifers that were in willow-lined drainages so that the willow-lined drainages would be more effective natural fuel breaks. And again, each one of these activities was designated for a particular year and budgeted. Next. This is an example of one of our meadow management activities. I wish I had it before this, but I don't, but you can get an idea from all these sticks and stems there. This was a massive cluster of coyote brush, pretty definite, and we used brush hogs to remove that. And the outcome was the separation of field, horizontal continuity of fuels. Next. I mentioned too that we explored some ideas on fuel management. And these included VMP, what's called the VMP program through CalFire, where we did prescribed burnings within the meadows. Several of them were done in the late 90s. The program didn't really continue because the best time to burn, to have prescribed burns at the sea range, is in the fall. And usually the rest of California is burning up, so CalFire wasn't really available to do a lot of these kind of burns, but it's a very effective tool in not only reducing fuels, but also keeping meadows as meadows. We explored grazing during the 90s as well, but could never really get it off the ground. We couldn't find a contractor until after 2000. So next. And that brings us up to our current fuels management plan that was prepared by Carol Rice under Charles and Associates in 2002. In 2000, the board decided that we needed to be more aggressive than the BEC program. And so the board voted funding to have this management plan prepared. But before I get into that plan, I'm going to ask Shelley to step in and talk about what fuel management really is in terms of, well, when you look at fuels, what are you really interested in? We can all look at the forest and say, well, gee, that's a lot of fuel up there. The log in your fireplace is fuel. But what does it take to get it to burn? And I think that's an important image you have to understand what our fuel management plan does. So I'm going to ask Shelley to step up.
I'm glad to see all the turnout today. It's definitely makes this worthwhile to see. I think more importantly than the text on this is to take a look at the picture. To some people's eyes, that would look like a decadent, dense forest. And when you measure total fuel load, you're looking at the entire fuels, so all those fuels together. What we look at, as far as when we want to manage a forest, when we want to do the commons work and the work even around your homes, is we want to change that. We want to make it so that less of that fuel is available. Okay? So when you look at that picture, dense, terrible, scary. When I look at that picture, I'm looking at what's available to burn. That's what I look at. And what's available to burn there is not very much. What do you think is the reason for that? If you had to guess. Right, it's a drainage. It's really moist. You have green ferns. And so the reality is there isn't a lot of available fuel there to burn. And so that's the thing that I want to try and get across to everybody is even though there's areas that are really dense, that visually may appear to be a huge issue, really, with the fuels management that we're doing, we're trying to change that and basically make less fuels available to burn. So like when you drive down Highway 1 and you see all the lower limbs that have been taken care of, I mean, that's just a good visual. That's a lot of where I look at it. We're basically making it so those trees are less available to burn. So that's the terminology we use. Does that make sense? Thanks. Since you use the law.
You only missed the little analogy at the bottom there. It's like, if you want to build a fire in your fireplace, what do? You don't start with a log and a match. You got to build something up. And so it's a similar concept. Okay, next. Okay, the goals of the 2002 Fuels Management Plan. Safe access and egress from roadways, and this is especially true on the east side of the highway where there's a limited road system and the fuel density is a lot greater. Next goal was reducing fire intensity next to structure, and again that's primarily on the east side of the highway where the fuels are greater. And the idea there was also to correspond to the fuel management practices that are required under state law to create a defensible space around your home. So the reduction of fuel occurred a lot next to clusters of homes in this particular goal. Minimizing the spread of fires that start east of Highway 1 was also a critical issue because of the topography. Keeping fires west of Highway 1 was also an important goal. And I'll go through how these goals are met next. This is the original map for the 2002 Fuels Management Program, and it shows the fuel treatment types that are in the program. You can see them up here in the right-hand corner. For example, on the east side of the highway, all these roads in green were forested roadside fuel breaks. The brown were open area or meadow roadside fuel breaks. The downslope calming zones, which met the goal of reducing the intensity of the fire near structures, you can see that they're uphill, but just down below where a lot of lots and homes are. And also with the roadside fuel break, I failed to mention that the focus of that is to achieve that goal of safe ingress and egress. That's getting fire trucks in and people out in a safe manner. Improve fire one high break. Fire break, you can't really see it here, but there was a lot of fuel management activity on both sides of the highway, including the down to mineral earth fire break close to the east side of the highway. The reduced fuel zones, which are shown there in yellow and orange, complemented the downslope calming zones. And then in blue are the grazing areas, which was really to manage fuels in open meadow areas. Next. I'm going to go through the different fuel treatment types, which are roadside fuel breaks, calming zones, the highway fire break, the reduced fuel zone, and the grazing program. Next. First, roadside fuel breaks. Next. Two types, forested and meadow. This is obviously a forested fire break, and both forest shot. Next. The idea here was to limit trees on either side of the road, so fire intensity, if it was coming up from below the road, would be less. And hopefully, that would help if the fire was in a canopy, it has the opportunity to drop out of the canopy. And, okay, next. There's another example of a foreshot with a lot of limbs close to the ground next to a road. Next. And here's the after picture with the trees limbed up. Now, on the uphill side of the road, like in this case, the distance we might go into the forest would be like 30 feet. On the downhill side, it would be more like 100 feet, because that's generally the direction that a fire is going to be moving, and that's generally the direction the flames are going to be spreading is up the hill. Next. In the open areas, here's an example before any treatment. Next. This is an after where you can see where we've mowed much wider outside our normal, about 5 or 6 foot mow line on most association roads. Where we wanted to have safe ingress egress, we mowed it quite a bit further. Next. Another example of a pre-condition. Next. Here's an after condition where the original was, you can see where we would normally mow, we extended that so that roadway is much more safer in the event of a fire traveling along it or over it. Next. Council calming zone. Next. And again, these were down below clusters of homes or individual houses. This is the before shot, and the after is next, where the trees have been limbed up and the forest thinned. And again, it goes back to that idea that Shelley talked about reducing the available fuel. So in the event of a fire coming up this hill, it has a chance to drop out of the canopy if it is in the canopy, because there's not much fuel down below it to support the fire, or if it's on the ground plane, to stay on the ground plane in these wetter areas. Next. Another after shot. Here you have a very high canopy forest, and the fuels on the ground have been reduced substantially, which is a safe condition that also keeps the forest floor down. Next. Improved Highway 1 fire break. Next. It's a before shot along Highway 1. Next. After, you can see where trees have been removed, shrubs limbed up, trees limbed up. Next. This is a precondition again, and in this particular case, what we would have done, what we would do in a case like this is remove the small trees and shrubs on the right-hand side of that untilled fire break at this point on the left side of your picture, and Highway 1 on the right side, and then till the fire break itself down the middle of her. Next. In open areas, we extended the mow zone, and also, it hasn't been done in this particular case, but we would till the area east of the highway there, so there's an additional fire break. Next. Reduce fuel zone. These are scattered throughout the Sea Ranch, mostly on the east side of Highway 1. This is the before shot. Yeah. And this is the after shot for the same location with significant removal of trees, spreading out the horizontal continuity between fuels. Next. Finally, grazing as a fuel treatment. You can see on the right-hand side where the area around the houses has been mowed, and the difference between the unmowed area and the amount of heavy thatch that is there. Next. Again, a before shot, and notice the amount of shrubs and even a small fir tree here that is succeeded into that area, along with a lot of the coastal scrub like coyote brush and lupin, and there's ferns and a lot of heavy thatch in that area. Next. And this is the same area afterwards, and you can see what has happened to that fir tree. Most of the crown of that fir tree has now been pruned off by the sheep and goats, along with heavy pruning of the coyote brush by the sheep and goats. And that fir tree probably didn't survive because there's so little live crown left on that thing. Next. Again, before and after, and oftentimes prior to any grazing, we would go in where there was really heavy coyote brush and use a brush hog to mow down the coyote brush so that the sheep could have an opportunity to graze the grasses, but also graze the coyote brush that comes back, because it doesn't kill it to brush hog it, it just comes back as fresh green material, but that's great for the sheep because they love it and they love to eat it. So it really keeps that coastal scrub invasion at bay. Next. Benefits. The Some more obvious ones are short-term benefits. If you're going to reduce the biomass and you're trampling all that thatch out there, that is going to equate into much shorter flame lengths than those pictures you saw of the heavy thatch. And with much shorter flame lengths, it's a lot easier for CalFire to control fire. The long-term benefits are really significant, and I think probably one of the most important parts of our grazing program is in that it does control the invasion of coastal scrub species such as coyote brush and lupin, et cetera. Also eliminates tree seedlings. So what that equates to is a control of natural succession over time. Nature abhors a vacuum. Nature would love to see all our meadows filled with trees and shrubs, ultimately, in the absence of any management. And sheep do a great job of that, because that little seedling tree that's out there right now that the sheep are clipping off, you're not going to need a chainsaw and cut that thing down in 10 years. So that saves management costs over the long term. Other good things about grazing: works on steep slopes. It's not an ignition source like equipment is. We've had some fires from using our brush hog before. Sheep don't do that. And it's cost effective. Of late, we recently sort of calculated it's around $85 an acre to manage fuels in the meadows. And that's significantly down from where we started, because it took a lot more effort on the part of the sheep and the goats to get to this $85 an acre. It's more like $200 an acre. Next. They don't complain.
I'm going strike.
There we go.
And you fertilize as they go.
Again, where we are, the current program started in 2002. Initially, it was on a 4-year reentry cycle. We're now down to a 3-year reentry cycle. And the FMP program was folded into the association's operation plan, so it's no longer a line item in the budget that the board has to approve every year. And it's a dynamic program that we're constantly modifying through volunteer groups like the Fire Safety Task Force, feedback from CalFire, and the Fire Safety Council. Next. And here's an example. This is, I showed you earlier, the 2002 plans, same area. It was updated in 2009, digitized by Mike Lane. And it shows some addition, like the red lines here and here. This is where we added additional roadside fuel breaks to make ingress and egress out of that area safer. We've also added other things in other places that other people will discuss about those things. Next. And then finally, this we just added this yesterday, and thanks to Mike Lang for providing this to me. And I'm going to ask him, even though it's not on your agenda, I'm going to ask him to speak a little bit about this, because this is, again, our fuels management program, and you can see like the downslope common zone here in the purple, the reduced fuel zones, and the orange and yellow. The yellow being more open areas, the orange being forested areas, Highway 1 fire break, et cetera, and also the grazing areas in there. But this is more than just a map of an area, and I'm going to let Mike speak to that, because I think it's important going forward.
Okay, thank you, Bill. And incidentally, my role on the Fire Safe Council is that of Sea Ranch GIS Coordinator. So what I want to show just very briefly is the main difference in the major advance that happened between 2002 and this 2009 update. And this incidentally was done in conjunction with work by the Fire Safety Task Force. There was kind of a combined effort here to do some updates. So the 2002 map that Bill showed first had the colored areas of the various managements, whether it's an open, reduced fuel zone or grazing area or whatever. Those are colored pencil or pen, and they're great, and you can reproduce them. And that's about all. this case, for both the maps you see on the bulletin board and more easy to see is the one here. Starting with the 2009 edition, we went digital with this and had it digitized, and incidentally I had a lot of good help and support with this, so I didn't do it all myself by any means. But what we have now is that each one of those colored areas, let's say, that you see there, is a line in an Excel spreadsheet. It has an ID, which I didn't show on the map, so I didn't clutter it up like OFC 30 or reduced fuel zone, whatever. It has an area in square feet. It has a position and coordinate space, so it's totally interchangeable with any other map that the Sea Ranch has, or that CalFire has, or that the Sea Ranch Security has, or the water company, or whatever. And it can, more importantly for management, you can add stuff to it, and this is just what we're starting to do. You can have the cost, what it was estimated to cost. What did it really cost? When was it done? When is it going to be done again? What did the crew have for lunch? It doesn't matter. Anything that has a spatial reference can be added to this. So it's a time and management tool, not just a map.
Thanks, Mike.
Mike didn't explain anything about what some of the colors do mean.
Bill, okay, the purple here, downslope conism.
I'm just curious what some of the colors do mean, if you could.
And incidentally, the legend is on the map that's on the wall there. I just left it off that to
Okay,
keep it
well,
simple.
then I can look there, that's fine.
Yeah, and I should say that I showed you the 2009 one, but you can see the date on this is 2010. So we have added things even since 2008, 2009. And the next group of folks, Jackie and John, are going to speak to that.
Thank you. In early 2007, the board chartered the Fire Safety Task Force and the Fire Safe Council at the same time. The Fire Safety Task Force started meeting in May, and the Fire Safe Council followed a couple of months later. A presentation was made to us, and when I say us, I mean the Fire Safety Task Force. I know the two groups get confused, but the Fire Safe Council is made up of staff and CalFire and real estate and PG&E and insurance interests, and the Fire Safety Task Force was made up of sea ranchers. So a presentation was made to us about the fire safety project matrix that became the center point of the Fire Safety Task Force recommendations that were included in the budget for 2008 and 9. That wound up becoming, that matrix was based on hazards that the professional group saw and projects that were basically unfunded. Some of those things that the Fire Safety Task Force took from that matrix were incorporated into the budget in 2008 and 9, and that included expansion of the FMP along power lines, which is where most of our ignitions, fire ignitions happen. We expanded the number of roads included in the roadside fuel breaks, which Bill showed a picture of a few minutes ago. Many of those were mid-slope roads, which we understood from CalFire would be a place, if there were a fire, that they would stop and fight. We increased the area and amount of fuel from 30 to 100 feet in the same locations on the east side of the highway. We increased the fuel load removal in fringe areas of the northern ravines, some of the chimneys, and the downslope calming zones. And we expanded the FMP to include one-time removal of pockets of dead and dying pine plantations that were identified by Shelley and Bill as being problematic. These projects represented about 10,000 man-hours of work, which we spread over a 3-year period. And once the increase in the budget was approved, the plan was broken down into specific projects and became the fuel matrix fuel treatment matrix, which is what John uses to assign his crews, and he's going to show you a little bit about those projects that were included.
Thanks, Jackie.
So this next set of slides is going to be a status report on those projects. We came up with about 32, 33 additional projects that we were adding to our original fuels management plan. And we broke it into 3 years, like Jackie said, and they were folded into the reentry cycle of the original fuels management plan. So as the crews were going through and doing their reentry work in the prescribed areas for that year, any of those new projects that fell into that area were incorporated into the reentry work. So not only was reentry work being done, and the new projects were also being taken care of. In 2007-08, we had done some extra pruning and removal of dead wood around the chapel and foothill close. And then we went forward into 2008, 2009, where we added some extra fuel breaks, roadside fuel breaks, and we also expanded upon those distances. All the projects were completed in those years. The ones that are up there that are ongoing are PG&E projects that we were working in partnership with them, and we're still working with that. That's one of the things we're doing as we move forward as the Fire Safety Council, and that's to work closely with PG&E in getting these treatments taken care of. This is 2008, 2009 continued. You can see there was quite a few projects completed and added to this, and also a few that still need to be worked with PG&E. There are also some grant projects that were taken care of this fiscal year in 2010, and you can see that those were completed. Next. This year, we are scheduled to finish with the projects that were added to the fire management plan as a result of working with the Fire Safety Task Force. We have scheduled some downslope calming zones south of Lupin. We have actually completed one project on there and have several grant projects that were also done this year. And we'll also have some grant projects that will be completed early in 2011. So these are some additional projects that are going to be taken care of via grants this year, and these are going to be added to the fuels management plan and incorporated into the reentry process as we move forward. So almost all of the projects that we've added into the fire management plan are now going to be on a reentry cycle also, and being looked at and kept, maintained as we move forward. This next slide is going to show how much money was budgeted by the association to do fuels management work since 1995 to present. And you can see where we had budgeted $40,000, $45,000 in those first few years. Now we've been doing close to $300,000, $200,000 a year in fire management work. So it shows a big increase in the work we're doing and the funding that we're getting to make this work. This slide will show an average per year per lot that was spent. The first number is from the 1995 to 2002, which was pre the existing fire management plan. It was about $56,000 and $24 per lot on assessment. After 2002 and this current FMP, you can see that number has increased significantly. It's almost $300,000, and an average assessment per lot at about $129. And that's a pretty good deal for the amount of work that's being done. The average assessment for all those years is about $66 per lot. So that's that, and next we've got Bill talking about PG&E. Oh, sorry. Oh, Shelley. Shelley, sorry about that.
time I watch this program and listen to John and go over the breakdown, in my 20 years with CalFire, I have to say that this community is by far the best that I've ever been with, as far as both the community and the work that gets done there, and this Fire Safe Council. There's Fire Safe Councils all over the state that don't do anywhere near what's going on. But I didn't know that I'd get another opportunity to say that, so I wanted to put that. So PRC 4291, I think since we did the program for a couple years in a row, everybody should be somewhat familiar, since you guys are all community members, and had somebody knocking on your door for an inspection at some point in time. So they just wanted me to touch a little bit on what PRC 4291 is. It's defensible space around the home required by state law. It only applies to structures. So where that comes into play is people who either adjacent to lots, the commons, things like that, where people will come to me with complaints or want me to do something. Well, my jurisdiction does end at the 4291 guidelines, which is the 100 feet around the structure or to your property line. So just important to kind of clarify that is 4291 applies to structures only. The nice thing is that with this cooperative relationship with the association, we can come up with solutions to help that. But unfortunately, there's no state law that we can rely on to make some of that stuff happen. In 2006, that was when we went from 30 feet, where 4291 specified. Before 2006, 4291 specified 30 feet around your home, and in 2006 it expanded to 100 feet, and broken down a little bit more. In the next slide, I'll actually talk about how it's broken down. So defensible space of 100 feet around the home is required by law. The first 30 feet is really the important one. That's the one that we want the greatest amount of reduction. What we're trying to accomplish is that the fire would slow down in that 70 feet. The furthest 70 feet, and then as it got closer to the house, that would be where the most reduction is, so that one, we can safely defend your house, which is my more important one, and then also the increases the survivability of your home if we can't be there. So that's the purpose of that, and it's referred to as people get caught up. It used to be your clearance around your house. We used to use that verbiage, and it really isn't clearance, it's management. So it's just, you're basically trying to reduce the fuels, but not necessarily clearance. So you can have single specimens, it's all, in the 4291 verbiage, it's all specified. You can have single specimens, you want to just maintain green, healthy trees or brush. There's certain ones, obviously, we talk about that are worse than others. Coyote bush, I always encourage people to try and in that 30-foot zone, take a coyote bush out, or keep it very, very clean and limb those types of things. So, next slide. So I think I've actually touched on most of that. The second bullet point is pretty important. Realistically, in most cases, when houses burn down, it is not the fuel that's right around your house. It's the embers that land in places that might have needles accumulated, or you have some flammable landscaping close to your house, or especially up in some of the areas that have a lot of tree litter that's right up against some of the siding that might not be as in good shape, where the siding hasn't been treated well. I mean, you definitely see some homes that haven't been well maintained on the outside, and that encourages embers to land in there and can ignite the home. So it's just really important to keep the gutters clean, keep needles off the roof, those kind of things. And I know it's a real struggle for the folks up on the ridge, where you'd be cleaning every day in order to, but it just stay aware of it, try and keep on top of it as best as you can. But that does tend to be a place where houses ignite is from embers landing on homes. Your defensible space is limited to the property line. I kind of went over that before, but it does. I can take care of your property line, but then it comes into how we work with the association, and Bill's going to talk more about that. But that we can encourage neighbors to talk to each other and come up with solutions that way without it being hopefully being a huge issue. Next slide. Oh, that's right, I forgot about the slide. So this goes back to that second bullet point on the previous slide. If you were going to look at that, what do you think is more hazardous? You know, we talk a lot about people really concerned about trees, and there's some other realities that are going to burn down your home. And the top left slide, which shows combustible material on the ground, it's just dry leaves up against a fence that is then connected to the home. So that's your concern. That's one of your big concerns, because embers do happen. Embers are going to happen. You hope that you have enough clearance around your house that the ember lands someplace and just goes out. But if you have a receptive fuel bed, which is kind of what we call it, which would be those dry leaves or that pile of wood that's up against either a fence or up against people's homes, I see uncovered. That's the reason why I know on the Sea Ranch it's a real struggle to try and find places to store your wood. And I know most of the homes here have wood stoves, so it's just really important that if an ember lands on it, that it goes out. And if you have a cover over it, that it helps that. But if an ember were to land in either one of those left slides, you're likely going to have it ignite. And so that's what we try and avoid. Whereas the right side, though, it is the forest, and it is the thing that people really get worked up about. The left side is the ones that you really want to pay close attention as a homeowner. Take a look at your own space. Next slide. That's it. Oh, good. So the inspection program that we did in 2007, 2008, then 2008, 2009. It was when the board funded to have 100% of the Sea Ranch inspected. Never in my career has that happened, and it was a great experience to see what that does. I saw such a change in the work that was done around people's homes. It really made an enormous difference. But this represents the first inspection that we did. So the first inspection of the first year it was implemented. So this is just a snapshot. Sorry if it's your home. We had to pick one, and sorry again if it's red. So the red structures were the fails on the first inspection. So then the second would be, that was the re-inspect on the first year. So that was amazing. And I mean the overall program, and I don't know if everybody knew this, but it was 90% compliance on the Sea Ranch. You guys made me look so good. Truly. It was great having the chiefs come up and take a look at this place, because they thought I was amazing. So I got to personally thank you guys. So then the second year, and this was the even more interesting one, is that by the second year, we actually had full compliance. I'd say that most of the divisions really were somewhere in this. We did have, a few that we'll have to keep at, but for the most part, we had a tremendous amount of compliance. And I mean, John will talk to that a little bit later about the measurement of the debris pickups and how that was affected by this program. So. Unfortunately, this year I had a complete changeover in staff, and I wasn't able to do really much of an inspection program because I felt as a community, you'd probably like my engineers to know how to pump and fight fire, those things, and then maybe inspections was a little further down the line. So we unfortunately have spent a lot of time with training and getting to know the area and those kinds of things, and it's kind of the nature of inspections is when it's not funded, then you're dependent on myself and my staff. And sometimes we can get some done, and other years when it's either busy fire season, we don't have the time to do it, or an example this year I had a complete turnover in staff, and so my priorities had to be somewhere else. So
Ms. Shell,
yeah.
is there a quote punishment, close quote, for non-compliance?
Why do you have to ask that?
I comply. I'm just curious.
So
All firefighters ask.
yeah. So Rob's question was, so if somebody doesn't pass continuously, what do we do? And it's a hard one because technically we can fine them, and we prefer to try and work with the homeowner. A lot of people who can't be in compliance have a reason. Some people just don't do it, but a lot of people can't do it or something like that. I pass it up to my boss, and then they take care of it. And I don't want to piss the community off. So, in most cases, my boss tells me just to keep re-inspecting and hope that we can get some compliance. If it's basically we haven't fined anybody is the bottom line. I hate to put that out there because I don't want people to think that that's a reason not to be compliant, but we do have the ability to fine. We just have not done it because it is bad PR. It tends to go to litigation and then ends up that nothing happens anyways, has been the past issues.
Does it make any sense to go to a fine system when you have compliance at this level anyway?
That's a great kind of statement. That's how I feel. If I'm going to my bosses and telling them that I have 90% compliance on Sea Ranch, they don't really care that there's 30 people that are out of compliance. The thing that I have a problem with, which I'm sure is kind of what's going around in a lot of people's minds, is those that are compliant are spending a lot of money in some cases, or a lot of work to become compliant. And the thing that I can tell you is being compliant is about saving your home. It's your asset. It's about taking care of your home and hoping that if a fire comes through, you're going to have a great chance at having that house at the end of it. And that's what it's about. And I think that needs to be the focus. And you guys are doing a great job of making that happen. Tim.
Shelley, is any portion of this last 10% non-compliant simply because of some inability to do it? I guess my question is, if there were a volunteer or professional or board-sponsored crew that could go around and be helpful to somebody who simply could not physically, for some reason, bring their home into compliance, would that be of any value?
I would say yes. Because you're going down the right road. There's definitely some of those non-compliant folks, either financially or elderly or for whatever reason can't. I think it's a great idea. It's a really hard thing to manage. Of who's the needs and who needs it and who wants it, and because it is a costly thing in some cases, especially the folks up in the timber that really have to do a lot of work or hire somebody to do that work.
Yeah, it might seem to be discriminatory, but the fact is, if there are some of these that are, when we're down to 10%, if there are some of these that are non-compliant just by inability to do it, perhaps there's a program that we could adopt that could be helpful in those cases.
I think it would be a great idea. I think it would be a great thing to look into and see what we could come up with. Absolutely. Hang on then. All right. Bill's gonna talk about basically the next step of how 4291 then goes into how the association deals with some of those issues.
Shelley mentioned that the PRC 4291 stops at the property line. And this being a community of rules, we got rules to deal with that. Actually, in 7.4.4 of the design manual, there's an opportunity for anyone who owns a home who wants to do fuel management work into the common area or into the restricted private area to come in, and it's usually handled because what we're talking about here is removal of what we call available fuel. That is all you need to do to get into the common area is simply get an encroachment permit. And oftentimes we fill those out in the office for folks, and there's no deposit. Usually there is a deposit for encroachment permits, but in this particular case we don't have a deposit required. And so that permits owners to enhance their defensible space to the spirit of 429. It's that 30 feet, it's that 100 feet defensible space area. And Shelley also mentioned that we do cooperate. So oftentimes, not too often, but every once in a while, we'll get a fuel management report from CalFire about a particular house that they're recommending that this owner go into the common area, restricted common area, or even their neighbor's lot to do additional fuel management to make their home safer. Next slide. And there's also a policy for that we have an administrative policy that actually goes to the point where we can require a neighboring lot, vacant lot owner to provide permission to a structure owner to go onto their property to do that fuel management work. Rule 5.1 within the TSRA rules encourages cooperation between neighboring owners, but where that cooperation is not provided, the association can step in and require that vacant lot owner to give permission to the structure owner to go onto the property. And if that owner does not do that, the association can perform the work and bill that owner. So there's a real incentive there to have that vacant lot owner give that permission. Next. This is just a diagram of how that might work, where the house on the top there, you see the property line in the red here, restricted private line here, commons out in this area. There's the 30-foot mode area around the house. So this lot owner, or this homeowner, in order to meet his defensible space requirement, house is only 5 feet away from the property line. So he can mow into the common area to do that work. Similarly, he can go into the common area to do the 100-foot defensible space requirement as well. And oftentimes, if this is a structure, say up in the forest, on hills, that a downslope calming zone might come right up into this area around the home. So what he does complements what the association is doing out in the common area here. Down on the terraces, where this is, it's the grazing program around this area that complements what that homeowner is doing. Next, John Prescott's going to talk a little bit about the branch and pickup program that Shelley referred to that really sort of got the 4291 compliance going.
Okay, so this next slide here is going to show, we started in 2003 with a member debris pickup program where we would go out 6 months of the year and go to anybody who got on the list and put brush out on the curbside to pick up the piles, to make it easier for the homeowners to have a way to dispose of this material that they'd be taken care of. So we were getting a little over 1,000 to 1,200 pickups in a year. And then in 2007, when it was funded 12 months and PRC 4291 was expanded upon from 30 feet to 100 feet, we thought there had to be a way to, allow the homeowners to more easily take care of that extra work. Because there's really nowhere to take this brush. You have to haul it up to the Annapolis dump, and usually have to pay somebody to do that. So this program really helped with that. We jumped way up over 2,000 pickups in a year, and that was a lot of brush that was being disposed of. And it really did allow the members to, come into compliance. I think that's one of the major things that led to such a great compliance number. And so, just want to say that that's been really good. Things now are leveling out a little bit. Once people meet the compliance, it's just like our fuels management plan. Once the first initial work was done, it's more of a re-entry. It's more of a keeping things trimmed down. So there's a little bit less brush generated. And that's why you'll see that the pickup amounts have dropped off. But I'm pretty sure they're going to level out right around 1,500, a little bit more per year. And that's a good sign. It just means that people are taking care of their property, and every person that does that, it just adds to the overall fire management improvements on the Sea Ranch. It's one of my favorite maps I've seen. We don't have one here today, but if you interpose that map that Shelley had of all the compliant lots on the map that we have on the wall showing our treated areas, it really shows that a lot of the Sea Ranch is being treated for fire management. And that's it.
Okay, PG&E partnership. Jackie mentioned our partnership with PG&E through the Fire Safety Council. Prior to the formation of the Fire Safety Council, the association sort of had an off and on relationship with PG&E about the work they would do along their power lines. And I think with the formation of the Fire Safety Council, they finally saw a group of people that they could talk to and really expand on their program here. And we invited them to the table, and they were willing to do that. So it's been really successful in that sense. Next slide. This is the major, there's two types of PG&E transmission or lines on the Sea Ranch. One is the transmission line, which is 60 kV, and the other is 12 kV. Those are the distribution lines. Jackie mentioned they're an ignition source for a fire, and we have had experience. The yard arm is a prime example, but there's been others as well where power lines have dropped and almost started fires. So with the partnership with PG&E, we were able to get them to do their entire transmission line that extends from above the chapel down all the way through to the north end of the ranch. And they cut back trees on both sides. And these are both after pictures. I didn't have any before, I wish I did. But it really expanded the distance these trees are away from the power lines. They are required by law to trim them, but in the past they only did the minimum. Now they're doing a lot more, including complete tree removal. Next.
Bill, is that because of their involvement with the Fire Safety Council?
I believe so. PG&E actually has two pots of money for treating power lines, one for the 12 kV and one for the transmission line, 60 kV. And we had an opportunity to talk to both groups, and the 60 kV people were really excited about this because we were able to do some notifications through the association for the folks along the 60 kV line, give them names and addresses, help them out. And they saw that as a great opportunity because in some communities they really butt heads with individual owners. But with the support of the association and the Fire Safety Council, they were able to get this done pretty quickly. And they spent probably 3-4 weeks working on just that 60 kV line, removing trees. And they don't have to come back for quite some time as a result of it. This is a distribution line that PG&E did some of the work. They removed limbs and a few trees along this line, but the before picture's on the left. We can just barely see that. That power line right there, look at all the stuff underneath it. Well, maybe they take care of the branches on the side, but if that line happened to break and drop that stuff, well, there's a real problem there. Yeah.
As I recall, Bill, there was also an issue of them dropping things and then just letting them lie into the transmission lines
That's
prior
correct.
to the task force and council's work with them.
Yeah, and they are not required by law to pick that stuff up, unfortunately.
But I believe now they are they not?
Well, actually, John's crew,
okay.
they're doing the limiting, they're stacking it. Our crews are coming by and shipping it up, so it's not a fuel hazard.
Oh, good,
But at
okay.
least they're getting it out of the trees.
Thank you for the clarification.
And in this particular case, this was taken care of by a grant that Louise put together through the Fire Safety Council to do this understory work. And we actually hired a contractor to do this work and use the grant money to pay for that. That part of it was not done by PG&E. Next. In this particular case, though, this is down by Wiemeyer Pool, and there's a lot of standing Monterey pine trees, which are sort of notorious for blowing over the wind and dropping branches and falling on power lines. It was a Monterey pine that actually started the Argonne fire. And so they were a little, that particular 12 kV group was really didn't have as much money as the 60 kV group, so they weren't able to do as much as we would like them to do, but they're still willing to work with us. And in this particular case, I believe they spent $20,000 to $25,000, I believe, on actual tree removal along this 12 kV line on this side. Next. And this is basically the same area where they removed trees to the left of our trail there. And you can see one, so right here, that had actually uprooted, fortunately ended up rooted away from the power lines, not into them. Next. Oh. Now Louise can talk about those grant programs.
Thank you, Bill. My part of the briefing, I at first thought was kind of odds and ends, but in reality, these odds and ends are still a part of the greater partnership that happens. If we didn't have the Fire Safe Council, we wouldn't be eligible for any of these grants, and the grants are kind of a partnership result. In 2009, from the Fire Safety Task Force, they recommended that we get a chipper at $50,000, and that was tough on the budget. But we went ahead and got half of that, or the $25,000 for the chipper, granted to us. So then the following year, we got some more money from the USDA Forest Service for the removal in the 5 areas. One of those was the one Phil just mentioned, the PG&E area. And I'll show some pictures of some of this. And then in this upcoming year, we have $31,000 coming for basically fuel reduction. And that pretty much just reduces our budget because we'd be spending it anyway. And so this is money that the crew would be, spending. So we get $31,000 back against what we're spending. So I think you've all seen the chipper out there. Yeah. And then for the 2010 grant, the 5 areas, this is the area on Deerfield, and on the left is the before picture, and on the right is after. And you can see the after isn't, they really did a good job with John and Randy's advice, and it's still a bit protected and sheltered, but the picture below, and this is a little bit kind of dark, but in the middle, there's not a lot left there in the middle. So they did a really good job of taking down a lot of trees, and these were things that were beyond our capabilities. So through the grant, we got to pay a contractor to do this. Then on Longmeadow, on the left, there's a stand of trees that were taken out. On the right, you can see they're gone, and then there's a close-up view. Then moving on, with this whole partnership, we've been able to achieve a lot of awards. Going back to 1992, Bill reminded me that through the Beck report, there was the Landscape Architects Merit Award. And then more recently, we got the California Emergency Services Association Silver Award for fuels management along with emergency management activities. A key one is the CalFire Directors Partnership Award. This is the only one awarded at that time, and this is for fuels management, and this is across the whole state. We were also recognized as a FireWise community in December 2009, and we'll be renewing. We'll be able to renew that designation as a community that spends money and takes into account fire safety and does education and all of that. And that, again, is the whole partnership. Then another little piece of this is the insurance issue. About 2 years ago, some folks got written letters saying that they might get non-renewed by their insurance carrier. So we took action and worked with the insurance company, gave them a whole packet of information on our fuels management program, what we were doing for fire safety, the fire hydrant data showing that they were in error as to where the fire hydrants were, and key was the CalFire inspection reports that CalFire and volunteers had done the inspection, and we had real specific data there. And so thus far we've had successful renewals in the insurance arena, because this was a big thing across California when they had the fires in Tahoe. A lot of carriers were trying to walk away, and through, I think, our data, they've been sticking around with us. Then the other thing is we had some suggested options and some different ideas that we looked through and spent some time investigating. The California Conservation Corps is students who work in the watershed area, and while the students don't get a lot of money with the overhead and the costs and everything, the actual cost to us, if they came to work, would be $11,000 a week, which is a pretty high, so that was kind of out of the picture. The Department of Corrections and CalFire folks, prisoners who earn the right and through training and good behavior earn the right to work on fire crews, but these include prisoners who are accused of, convicted of all types of felonies, excluding only murder, one, and arson. So any number of murder, two, man, there's a whole lot of things that these guys could be convicted of. They're only available 3.5 hours a day because they're based out of Parlin Forks, which is east of Fort Bragg, so it takes them about 2 hours to get here, 2 hours to get back and eat. They can't take down the larger trees. The work areas have to be pre-approved. What we found in kind of investigating this as a potential pilot project is that the staff time taken to investigate the areas, find the areas that they maybe could work in, and monitor, clean up the debris, and do all that would really cost a whole lot more than what we're benefiting from, since we've got a staff that already knows what they're doing and doesn't need that oversight. And there's also, I think, key is the potential security risk to Sea Ranch when you bring a whole group of prisoners with their connection to their friends who know that there's a lot of vacant houses here. It just didn't seem to work out financially or any which way. And then I'd like to turn it over next to Caerleon and Safford for the CWPP.
Hello, everybody. How are you doing? You staying awake out there? It's a great program. I'm Caerleon Safford. I'm with Fire Safe Sonoma, which is the county-wide Fire Safe Council for Sonoma County. Our mission is to sort of increase awareness of wildfire issues throughout the county through educational programs, as well as helping people carry out defensible space regulations and fuels management project through grants and so on and so forth. One of the things that we've also dabbled in on the side is creating community wildfire protection plans, or CWPPs. I was fairly heavily involved, I think you could say, in writing the one for the Sea Ranch, which we finished up last year, and it's signed off and ready to go, which is a huge accomplishment. And also in process right now, I have a county-wide, which is in the editing stages. Soon will be out for peer review and then we'll be out for a public review period. The purpose of the community wildfire protection plans, this was part of the mandate of the federal government, part of the Healthy Forest Restoration Act of 2003. And the idea was that the CWPP would provide, would force collaboration between federal, state, local, and community groups when fuels management plans were created, arrived at, and potentially funded by federal grants. In Sonoma County, that isn't quite as much of an issue as it is in other parts of the country where you have huge swaths of federal land, and the issue was the federals were making arbitrary decisions about how communities dealt with their fuels. So that was what the impetus for creating the CWPP was all about. Where it's come to now is that the CWPP not only ensures this sort of collaborative approach to fuels management, but the real meat in the community wildfire protection plan is that what you end up with is a prioritized list of projects which can then be undertaken. And it's largely because the CWPP is in place here at the Sea Ranch that Louise and the Fire Safe Council has been so successful at getting the grants that you've gotten, which has been great. It's a huge help. That's darn near $100,000, maybe a little more. That has come off of your direct fuels management plan. So this has been a really good thing for your community. So that's kind of the CWPP thing. But the thing I was thinking there as I was sitting here listening to all of this go on, you know, I work throughout the county. Last night I was doing a program for the Sobre Vista development, which is over on the other side of Sonoma. And I'll, you know, sitting here listening to the list of accomplishments that have happened here on the Sea Ranch, you have no idea how astonishing all of this is. You have Firewise recognition. You have people doing mapping. You have a sheep and goat program. You have 10,000 man hours that have gone into making plans and programs. You have Carol Rice's plans. You have, it's astonishing how much has been done up here at the Sea Ranch, and I think that everybody needs to be quite proud of everything that you've done. But the one thing that I am going to do, aside from complimenting the board and the Fire Safe Council and the task force and everybody else, CalFire, Shelley, everybody, but the thing that my primary mission these days is I'm out there doing education throughout the county. The thing that I'm really wailing on people for is personal responsibility. You really have a lot going on in terms of overall fuels management of your forested areas and all of that stuff. You have a lot happening there. And really, most of it comes back to the individual homeowners. Really needing to look at your homes specifically, especially the 30-foot zone, before you start really focusing on that forest that's way over there. It's a lot about personal responsibility and personal choice. I think that you guys have done a great job. Happy to have been a part of it. Thank you very much.
My name is Plakos. I'm a member of the Volunteer Fire Department, and I'm the Volunteer Fire Department's representative on the Fire Safe Council. And I'm just going to say a couple words about educational outreach in the past. Something that's really important part of community fire safety is education of the community, so that they know what to do, as Caerleon said, about personal responsibility. They know what to do in their own area and around their own house, and also so that they know what other people are doing, know what PG&E is doing, what the association is doing, what CalFire is doing. So this is just a list of educational and outreach things that have happened in the last few years. There were plenty, well, not as many, but there were some before that, but this list basically mostly goes back to the last few years. We've had a number of community events, like this one. We had the meeting to give the final report of the Fire Safety Task Force. There's been a couple of other state open houses which aren't strictly about fire, but there's information there about fuel management and many other safety issues in the community, and assorted public meetings. There was a flyer that went out to all homeowners last year. It covered some topics about evacuation, gave some tips for things to take, how to leave a tag on your house. We've had multiple, they're called fire ecology walks. There were opportunities for members of the community to go out with Shelley Spear and actually look at vegetation, look at homes, look at examples of clearance and ways to do clearance, which were really helpful. Next, please. And then the next two slides, I'm not going to list them all, but there are a lot of written articles that have appeared in the Soundings and in the Bulletin. They're very informative. And one reason to mention those today is that these written ones are all still available to you. So if you want to learn about things that have happened in the past, all of the Bulletin and Soundings are, of course, on the CSRA website, and they're also on the CD that you can order. And the last bit about education is just, in terms of awareness, is the fire danger signs that you see on Highway 1. Those are set by Sea Ranch Security, but based on the daily update from CalFire. And that's it.
Okay, fire behavior modeling. What is FARSIGHT? FARSIGHT is a fire growth simulation model using spatial information on topography and fuel combined with wind and weather. It incorporates algorithms that help predict surface fire, crown fire, spotting, post-frontal combustion, and fire acceleration. It's a two-dimensional model, and for those of you that aren't real familiar and spend a lot of time with algorithms, like me, 2 dimensions so that I can see on a map what's happening as opposed to a chart was a huge visual improvement to understand what you're looking at. It runs on Windows operating system on a standard PC, and it features a graphical interface, and it generates GIS output. So it's linked with all of our maps that Mike Lane has done for us. We provide multiple layers of information on the fuel. It will take surface fuel information, whether you have grasses or duff or debris, you know, the kindling that we were talking about earlier. It will accept shrubbery information, what type, the density, how close together the various bushes are, what the height is, and perhaps most importantly, in my thinking, is its fuel moisture. It also incorporates tree layers. It's the type of tree, crown bulk density. When you talk about fuel load, crown bulk density is the canopy, how much stuff is in the upper part of the tree. It incorporates spacing. Height to live is the limbing program. How high up have you limbed the trees? And that's a big item. And again, the moisture content. It incorporates terrain elevation, so it understands when the fire is going uphill or downhill, and it takes in the slope and the aspect. It uses our weather, which is temperature and humidity, and it uses wind speed and direction. And if you decide that you're going to start a fire in the simulation at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, it actually goes back to 10 a.m. Monday, checks the weather, and determines what the moisture content in the shrubs and the ground and the trees would be 24 hours before the fire starts. It's very sophisticated. It displays all these results visually on a variety of maps. We can customize it and change it. And you can actually put in resource allocations, which is fire engines and firefighters, to affect the rate of course of speed. But the group that's been working with it, we generally light a fire and let it run for 4 or 5 hours uninterrupted, because we want to see what it will do and where it will go, not how to stop it. But you can, it has those tools built in. Okay, who uses FARSIGHT? It was developed for the National Prescribed Fire Program by the National Park Service. If you think back about the Yellowstone fire in 1988, it was about that time. The key creator was Mark Finney, who's at the Fire Modeling Institute in the Fire Science Lab at the U.S. Forest Service in Missoula, Montana. Mark did his PhD work in Salt Point. And when we became interested in working with FARSIGHT, we contacted Mark. And in fact, one of our members, Tom Osborne, flew to Missoula and met with him when he was on vacation in Wyoming. So we were able to talk with him about our exact specific situation here, and he was familiar with the area, so it was a great benefit. Farsight is used by the U.S. Department of Interior, the National Park Service, all kinds of federal and state land management agencies. Also used by CalFire, and a major proponent is our Battalion Chief Marshal Turbeville. And of course, Carol Rice, who was our consultant for our FMP, is the one that first exposed us to Farsight and its capabilities. In terms of fire modeling tools, they are a proven means for analyzing major fire risk. Sometimes if you catch news where there's a major fire burning somewhere, you can see a laptop on the hood of a fire truck and somebody's looking, and they're using that aspect of the model where they can say, what if we put our helicopters here or our planes here with a retardant? So they're actually testing ways to fight a large-scale fire with the model. What it's best for is to study the relative effectiveness of fuel treatments. Comparisons really work best. Modeling is not a fact, but it provides insight into what your problems are. And so what it allows us to do is say, well, what if we limb the trees up 5 feet, and how does the fire burn through there? And then what if we limb it up 10 feet, and what's the difference? And so it gives us an ability to make comparisons and figure out where we can spend our resources most wisely. It helps to educate as to where and how a fire will burn. It creates motivation for homeowners. Tom and Alex and I have been at the Are You Safe open houses the last couple of years with the laptop, and we will start a fire and run a simulation for anybody that stops by, and we can burn your neighborhood for you. It also can provide real-time assistance to responders during a fire. However, it was designed for areas much, much larger than Sea Ranch, and so that probably wouldn't work here. And one thing that appealed to us is there's no emotion, no personality, we just get science instead of fear. And so it's helped us look objectively at various scenarios and what our options are. And it has a history of accuracy. Much as we did, other folks in land management agencies have taken the model and gone back and recreated a fire that happened to see how accurate it is, and so they can see that it would burn, in fact, the way that it did burn. So it has been shown to be accurate. Okay, what have we done with Farsight? I want to introduce Alex Long and Tom Osborne. I know they're both here today. They are the brains behind our use of Farsight. Fortunately for me, I have the trouble with maps, and I'm a Mac user, and it only works on PCs. And these guys can load it and run it and modify it and change it, and they've been doing this now for 2 years since the Fire Safety Task Force sunsetted itself. We learned to use the model. We recreated the yardarm fire as best we could. Our map didn't include Stewart's Point, so we weren't able to show the whole thing. But we found that we were pretty capable of recreating that fire, and that gave us confidence that the model would work for us. We have investigated the sensitivity of the results with various assumptions by doing those what-if scenarios, and we have gone in and done studies showing wind speed at 7 to 15 miles an hour, and then 12 to 20 miles an hour, and see what's different and how it moves. We've burned areas that are grazed versus areas that are not grazed to see how that changes. And we've done open grass areas versus the calming zones. We've also started to refine our vegetative data layers by walking around. We've gone out, I think it was on Pine Meadow, somewhere over in the Moonraker Crow's Nest area, and wanted to look and see, does the map show what we're seeing on the ground? If this is a compliant 4291 area, are we showing it properly on the fuel layers on our model? This is a continuing effort. As I said, Tom and Alex and I have been working on it along with Louise for 2 years since our committee ended. We want to be able to work with the board and Fire Safe Council and answer specific questions about risk reduction and cost effectiveness of the various treatments that we use, and to try to highlight areas of concern that we're not attacking yet. We want to improve the model's effectiveness with specific TSRA detail by obtaining higher resolution aerial photography for use as a base layer, and that'll help us determine our canopy cover and the crown bulk density. One of the problems we ran into is that we didn't have weather for the coast that was indicative of what's here in Sea Ranch. We could get weather in Boonville, and we could get weather in Olema. And it has to be in a certain format, and so Tom set about finding a way for us to get weather and put together our wind logger program, which I will talk to in just a moment to get us that weather. We need to do some data digitalization and continue to update our model so that it reflects what we're doing on the FMP. We need to characterize custom layers for our 4291 compliance. Somebody that's compliant in the meadow doesn't have the same set of fuel layers as somebody on the hillside, so we still need to work on that. And we need to have access to some minimal funding to stay current and be able to get these pieces that we need in place to make this model more and more effective for us. And it'll help us understand our risk. And then here's a sample of one of the simulations. Alex did bring his laptop, and he can run a simulation for anyone that wants to stay afterwards and see how it works. So this was one with 7 to 15 miles an hour versus 12 to 20. And speaking of winds, we have our wind monitoring program. Many people have asked about the wind loggers. Tom put together the prototype, Tom Osborne, he put together the prototype, built it, and put it out at the very south end of Sea Ranch. We had 9 locations identified, about a mile apart. But we needed to have wind in a format that would work in the model, and that was every 10 minutes we needed to have wind speed and wind direction, and we didn't have that. There's a couple of folks that have their own weather sites here on Sea Ranch, but they break down, and in my research I found that most of the anemometers broke. And so there were big gaps in the data, so we needed to have our own information that was accurate. There were no other sources, so Tom built this prototype. The program is that they're 1 mile apart on the bluff, catching the incoming winds, and then the model knows what to do with the wind once it's over our over Sea Ranch on the map. The first one was installed at the south end on Yard Arm in April. The second one was installed at the lodge 2 weeks later, and the third one was installed 2 weeks after that at Sea Meadow, which is down by the end of Galleons, I believe. Each unit leapfrogs the others, so that there's always 3 of them up. So we take the first one down and we put it in the 4th location, took the second one down, put it in the 5th location. All the homeowners are notified ahead of time so they know what it is. It collects data for 6 weeks at each location, and then it's downloaded for correlation and analysis into the computer. And we just finished our 9th location at the north end, and we are back down at the south end, and we just reinstalled one at the lodge last Thursday. We'd really like to have them continue to generate data for us at least over an entire year. But Tom did put together some, yeah, that's the raw data. And these are some of the conclusions, 13,000 10-minute intervals. So it was interesting, the peak gust from March through July was 40 miles an hour. So our intrepid little group is going to continue working with the model and see what information we can get to help us reduce our fire risk. And I think with that, Randy, do you finish up?
wasn't asked what we put in summary, but I'm in awe with the people I work with, the people I work for, and the talent and the dedication. Budgets were set, efficiencies were met. I don't know other programs within the state of California that do the same thing. I've talked to several people. I've even spoken to Bill Chapman, who was the one that drew the first fuels management plan back in 2002 that was adopted by the board, and I remember him sitting there with crayons and colored pens making this thing go, and I said, "What is that?" And he said, "Get out of here, you're bothering me." So I came back a couple hours later wanting to know if he wanted some help, and he said, "Well, if this is adopted, you'll be guaranteed 4 years of work." It's gotten bigger than that. It's become bigger than that. It's a very efficient program, and I just would like to have a show of hands of appreciation for these folks here and for you, the community. With the right way to go, I don't know if I turn this back over to you, Chris. I mean, excuse me, Bill.
We'll die for less than that.
Okay, Bill.
All right, thank you. This obviously is a very comprehensive effort, and a lot of time is going to spend to bring this to us. And I know the board is most appreciative. Roy was talking to us. I am kind of, I'm sure the board has questions, and I'm sure that there may be some questions from the community. And so we do have an open mic over there. I kind of like, I would like to take up Tom and Jackie on seeing that fire model demonstrated, if that's possible after the gathering here.
I think it's Alex.
And, or Alex?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was
At
that?
all?
Bill would like to see a simulation afterward.
Roy was talking to us. I am kind of, I'm sure the board has questions, and I'm sure that there may be some questions from the community. And so we do have an open mic over there. I kind of like, I would like to take up Tom and Jackie on seeing that fire model demonstrated, if that's possible after the gathering here.
I think it's Alex.
And, or Alex?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was
At
that?
all?
Bill would like to see a simulation afterwards.
After, for those that might want to stay, I think that would be really interesting. And one of the things I picked up on, Jackie, when you did that was you said it gives us insight into what our problems are. Can you tell us what our problems are? Or anybody, I'm just going to throw that open to all of you. Is there something here that keeps you up at night? Is there something that we need to be paying attention to, more so than we have? And I recognize a lot has been done, but there's always more that you can do.
Well, I think that comment was originally to respond to the idea that a model doesn't solve all your problems. It just tells you where they are. It is not an end-all, but it is a great tool, and it allows us to light a fire and see what's going to happen instead of waiting for a fire to come and see how bad it's going to be. So I think it's a really useful tool, and it has told us some things, and I was asking Alex about this the other day. I think that we understand that the height to live is a really key component, and that's the limbing, the distance that things are limbed up. That is really, really important when you start to understand flame height based on what's underneath, and that whole idea of kindling that was on one of the slides. What we're doing is trying to pick up all the kindling in Sea Ranch, in all the places that we think might catch on fire. And we spend a huge amount of money, and to come as close as we do to treating every square inch of Sea Ranch is pretty amazing. There isn't that much that's never looked at. That doesn't mean it's perfect, It doesn't mean there aren't places that still need attention. I worry about hedgerows. I worry about limbing up. I wish the sheep ate more. And went in other locations. I'd like to see the sheep expanded on some of the east side places like my house.
I think you have an in.
I think you have it in there too.
Okay, if I could add one thing to that, as Jackie mentioned, the power of these models is the what if questions. It's, so for example, in a given wind and moisture scenario, how much time does security or do we have to evacuate Schooner Drive, for example? Or which roads are closed and unavailable for either equipment to come in or people to leave? What's the difference between a 20-mile-an-hour wind and a 40-mile-an-hour wind? I mean, that sort of, it's problem/planning that I think is the real value of the model.
I don't know if anyone else is.
So I agree with all that. So do we have problem areas that we need to be paying more attention to? I mean, I hear about chimneys and,
You know, if I could stick my oar in one more time, is this is typically what I see when I'm out there in the world, is I see people worried about big things. I see them worried about forests. I see them worried about that guy over there who hasn't done this. And what I perceive, the thing that is by far the most likely to burn down your house is probably within 30 feet of your house walls. And so, to my mind, the most important thing is homeowner action, is looking at the structure itself, looking at the vegetation, especially within 30 feet, but out to, obviously, the 100-foot that 4291 requires, is crucial. It's a crucial element. And everything you guys are doing already in contending with the issues that have been identified in all the planning that you've done is fabulous. But I would still say a lot of it goes back to the homeowners and what they're doing on their structures within 30 feet of their structures.
So you mentioned where are the problem areas, and I think my answer to that is we have a process for finding them, and it's through the Fire Safe Council, it's through the Fire Safe Task Force, CalFire, all the people who are cooperating on this plan and moving it forward is a way of getting at where those problem areas. And I think when we identify problem areas, we deal with it through the plan. One example for me is still the 12 kV distribution lines. A lot more work needs to be done with that particular area because it's an ignition source. And so that's something that the council has talked about, and we're going to continue to work on with PG&E.
okay, so basically what I hear you saying is that as we move through this process, we identify problems. As we identify problems, we schedule their solution and take care of them. Okay. Chris?
What about vacant lots? Are they a problem? Nobody has to clear a vacant lot. If there's fire, if it's ignition source, they don't clean the brush up, whatever. Is that an issue?
I think that's a site-specific question. I think it's a site-specific question about is a vacant lot a problem? I think a vacant lot out in terraces, probably not, especially when the sheep go through there, and they oftentimes do, because sometimes owners invite the grazer to put the sheep on lawn. So there may be specific lots that are an issue, but it is a site-specific thing. And I don't want to put Shelley on the spot, but since she deals with fuels, she may have something to say about that.
Yeah, sure. I figured you were going to say it, but there is a method in dealing with it. Obviously, I mean, I did speak to it with 4291 that there isn't a state law that can facilitate it, but I mean, in my career, it's always been an issue. the vacant lot next door whose grass is, 5 feet high. What can we do? And so, I mean, this is the first place that I've worked actually where there is a solution or an attempt to a solution where the association has a method of trying to encourage neighbors to talk to each other, to allow encroachment. So it's still the asset. The asset is the home. So as the homeowner who has the neighboring lot, to have that lot owner allow you to encroach to protect your home is what we try and do to facilitate. And then that can happen through the association. And it comes usually, when we do inspections, it comes as a recommendation in the comment section of your inspection form. We encourage you to talk to the association about we encourage you to talk to your neighbor, or if it's in the comments, talk to the association about an encroachment permit. And so it comes as a recommendation, though we can't actually enforce it, but
So-
you can.
So to summarize, what you're basically saying